Hello, my name's Dr. Hussain Gandhi. I'm here to talk to you about the future of general practice. And apologies, I'm not going to be there with you live. I'm afraid I'm doing other things right now, business of general practice and all that. But I was asked to come and talk to you about what the future holds for you in your careers. And well, how about we just get straight into it? So let's get started. First of all, it'd be nice to know who I am, isn't it? So this is me. More people know me by my avatar on social media and that kind of thing than they do face to face, but you'll come across me if you search me up. And what I actually do, well, I'm a GP in Nottingham. I work in an area called St Anne's, which if you're from Nottingham, you've probably heard of, and that's the practice that I work at. In addition to that, I'm also a clinical director of a primary care network, so called Nottingham City East, which takes up a fair chunk of my time. I also work on a platform called EGP Learning, which I use to help educate people about how to use technology effectively and also how to learn. I do this through a variety of mechanisms, including using social media, which I'm often commented to have the internet plugged into my brain. So I'm afraid you're going to see lots about this kind of stuff. If you want to check out any of my content, feel free to do so. It's all there. Just type in EGP Learning. I'm pretty sure you'll come across it, either YouTube channel, podcast, whichever and stuff. And that's an example of some of the things I put out there. So various different content and videos and all that kind of stuff that you're welcome to have a look at, whether it's about clinical stuff, non-clinical stuff, learning, loads of things. I also do a fair amount of representation work. So I work also as a part of a Nottingham local medical committee. I'm a representative on their board. I also work as a podcast editor for Innovate, which is a GP trainee specific journal. I also am a treasurer for GP Survival, as well as I'm a national elected representative of the RCGP Council as well. I also run a System 1 Facebook user group, so feel free to join if you ever end up having to use System 1. And I'm an absolute geek, and I do not underestimate this element. I love all the kind of things that you can see here, including board games, Marvel, anime. Yeah, I'm just a bit of a geek. You can tell by my avatar, sure. Anyway, I want to talk to you about the future of general practice. And general practice has rapidly changed. Many people still think of general practice, things like Dr. Foster. They think about it, things like Carl Kennedy, and even Dr. Brown Bear, as the typical clinician that comes up and visits you, and that's about it. You know, that does all this kind of elements within general practice. But general practice was already changing in the past few years to a different kind of model. And then it kind of got supercharged by a tiny little thing called COVID. And as a result of that, we jumped from about 5 years worth of change into about 5 weeks. And as a result of that, we now offer digital primary care as a first point of contact for many things. And this is different potentially to what you signed up to. But it's interesting to know what your future is going to look like. So let's have a look at that, shall we? I'm going to do that by talking about 3 colleagues of mine. So first of all, we've got Dr. Leonard Bones. So Leonard is a part-time locum GP. So that means he works in various different practices like a subcontractor, effectively. He's also a single dad. He works remotely, typically from home, but he will also do face-to-face clinics on occasion, as well as work in the A&E department and also in the out-of-hours area, because that fits around childcare so much more effectively for him. He has responsibilities at the end of the day. He also has responsibilities as a BMA representative, so keeping his hand in other kind of things to keep his brain active, and also doing purely clinical work can be quite challenging. In addition to that, he also loves to do some work with his drama group, keeping on with his acting career. Well, how does he do this? One of the massive changes that came out of COVID was the concept of using digital triage, or total triage as it's called. This is effectively analysing any kind of clinical interaction that's needed and figuring out the best route for that, whether that's online consultations, so kind of like email consultations that many of you may have come across, but this is more moving towards using individual systems, to telephone consultations so that this can work remotely from home, whether that's in the practice or other areas, or video consultations, which was the big thing that massively changed in the past 8 months or so, with almost 95% of practices across the country now offering video consultations compared to only being 7% this time last year. What a change. And I guess it's because of the way we can now offer this. So many different tools and elements have happened that mean that we can now offer examinations, particularly through video interfaces, as well as understanding how much of this is safe to do. We had to do this. COVID massively changed the way that things work. So knowing how you can do this is going to be really important moving forward in your career. If you want tips on how to do that, check out some of the content that's available for you there. But One of the key things that did massively change is about the concept of us being able to take images from patients and use that so much more effectively. This is something that I think general practice really felt hesitant about initially, but have learned that this can work so effectively. Things like teledermatology work so amazingly nowadays, particularly with patients often having access to the devices that allow us to get really good images. And this just leads to a better flow. Often, a lot of my consultations now, if a patient says I've got a rash or something, that they want me to see, I'll say, well, can you send me a photo of it? Because if you can, I could probably tell you what's going on because I've already taken a bit of a history, which is the most important part of analysing what a patient needs, and then having that confirmation of an image. Clearly, there's some things that aren't going to work that well. But one of the things Leonard did realise with the massive change that he had to go through is that he had to learn to type faster, and absolutely learning his keyboard skills is a priority. One thing I would recommend to all of you right now listening is work on your typing skills. It is one of the best ways to save you time in your career. Next up, we're going to talk about one of my other colleagues, so Dr. Dottie McStuffins. Now, Dottie is an amazing person who works as a salaried GP. So what she effectively does is employed by a practice, and she works regular sessions, both seeing patients, having some of the digital work that we talked about in terms of administrative time, doing online consultations, telephone consultations, and then seeing patients face-to-face. But in addition, she also does some additional clinics. She does virtual child health clinics. So this is where she can offer care to patients through a virtual interface, and we'll talk about that in a second. She also does care home ward rounds on a regular basis. This is one thing that's been part of our contract that's just been instilled this year and will likely continue for the next few years in order to make sure we're looking after our more vulnerable patients so much more effectively. Dottie also happens to be an avid toy collector. So I mentioned about these virtual clinics. What are they? Well, in particular, virtual group consultations is something that you will see develop in general practice over the next couple of years till it becomes the norm, just like health clinics and that kind of stuff. And this is the concept that you bring patients with a similar health issue together and get them to help to learn from each other with being facilitated by a clinician that also understands the more complicated elements of things. And this is something that's working really well. For chronic disease, there's really good models of this working for things like diabetes, for COPD, and that kind of thing. But let's think bigger, let's think larger. What about things like chronic pain clinics, some aspects that are really challenging to deal with? Child health clinics, in terms of how we can help patients understand how to manage their eczema more effectively rather than the 10 minutes they may get with a GP. What about child feeding, in terms of all the things they need to be aware of and that kind of stuff? Health visitor clinics can be really effectively done through this kind of model and mechanism. And I think we're going to see massive growth in this area as time goes on. But in terms of analysing patients, we also need to understand how we can do that effectively. What about doing virtual ward rounds at the care homes? And in order to do that, sometimes you are going to need some examination-based information. Well, let's use tech, shall we? Bluetooth stethoscopes are an amazing piece of kit that allow you to have one of the people at the home, so for example, a nursing care home resident nurse, to basically hold the device for you under your instruction, place it in the appropriate places to give you the information, because that sound can then transmit back to you from a separate environment. This is something that amazingly was pioneered during the whole concept of COVID because of the infection control issues and because of not wanting to expose those patients to potential risks. Actually, by doing this, you can get some really good information. And this technology is improving. We now already have Bluetooth stethoscopes will also give you a 2-lead ECG at the same time as you being able to do this. The future has so much more to bring with it, including visual. What about digital endoscopes? So you can look at patients' ears, noses, that kind of stuff without having to expose them to unnecessary procedures and stuff, particularly if it's done by people that they're aware of. We're also going to have increasing amounts of point of testing kits. Many of us are already waiting avidly for a point of testing kit for COVID, but actually, let's think bigger. What about health conditions that can do this? Already we see this with BM machines checking for diabetes, glucose levels and things. But also, what about other kind of CRP testing kits, which are rapidly becoming available across the whole country? But what about other conditions? We will see massive growth of this, I feel, in the next 10 years or so. But one of the things about Dottie that you do need to know is that Dottie, unlike Leonard, hates to type. She really doesn't get it. So what she does instead is use digital dictation to help her. And particularly she uses digital dictation transcription that learns from her voice and therefore means that she can work more effectively because it means that she can transcribe that information that's in her brain to the computer systems so much more quickly and effectively. Dottie also does a lot of work remotely in a different way to Leonard, and as a result of that needs access to various pieces of information, particularly when she's doing her prescribing for her care home ward rounds. One way that she can do that is have the apps on their phone. And in particular, one of the best apps available for clinicians in the UK is absolutely the BNF app. So the British National Formulary. It is effectively the Bible of prescribing. Well, it's available for free. You need an NHS.net account. Once you've got that, you get access for free. I believe even the students get it for free. And it's an amazing app. So feel free to check it out. But what about prescribing apps to patients? Is that something you may want to do? Is that something that just sounds so sensible? Again, COVID rapidly changed the way many of us looked at these kind of things. But understanding which ones are going to be the most effective to use, that's a bit more challenging. It'd be nice if there was a BNF for prescribing apps. What do you know? There is. Check out Orca. It's an organisation for care and review of health applications, and what they effectively do allow you to basically understand the different types of apps that are out there, why they're good, why they're not good, how often they're updated, where the clinical information comes from, and gives you that element of basically information to make an informed decision as to whether or not this app is better than this app and whether it's suitable to be recommended or prescribed to patients. Massive fan of this. And lastly, let's talk about our third colleague. So this is Dr. Gandalf. He's a GP partner, so he runs a practice as well as working with it and doing some of the things that you've already heard about. But in addition, he's a clinical director. He's a GP trainer and educator, so he's got a massive focus on education. He does a bit of media work as well because it kind of lends itself in towards that, and he does content creation as well. Loves creating his board games. Sounds like a really interesting dude, doesn't he? Well, he's looking at different ways that his practice can develop, as well as working with the clinical kind of aspects of primary care networks, sharing staff and skills across different areas and supervising them. He also looks at new technologies. What about virtual reality? Yeah, it's coming. It's here, in fact. We already use virtual reality to help settle patients when they're having a blood test done about anxiety of the needle phobics and that kind of stuff. Or also delivering pulmonary rehabilitation clinics through a VR interface, meaning that those patients that are actually unlikely to come to the clinics can still have that healthcare element. And I'm going to see massive growth into this. Alternately, we can look at AI. So a couple of years back, AI was thought to change basically the entire of healthcare, and it has, but not in the big bang kind of way. But what AI is and what AI will do is it gives us information in a different way. And one thing I can definitely assure you, there's always been these concerns that AI will replace doctors. It will not. However, doctors that use AI will replace doctors, and that's an absolute essential thing that you need to be aware of. The information you can get through using AI algorithms and machine learning will mean that we will be safer and better clinicians. And a lot of that information is going to come from different sources as well. Smart devices increasingly are being used. For example, look at the Apple Watch number 6. So much technology in that is almost medical grade level technology and can be trusted in almost that same way. And that information can be used to help a patient understand aspects of their health in terms of what they need to be aware of, and using that information effectively, sharing that information with the patient. That's where we're going to see real benefits of healthcare and hopefully patient responsibility of their healthcare to lead to better options. What about learning? Well, I'm an avid fan that learning can change, and we've seen that happen over COVID. I'm sure many of you have, in the way that you've had to learn, the way that you've had to take in information. What about things like podcasts? Massive fan of these. I think they're a great way for people to learn and learn information that's important to them. Alternately, some are more visual learners and prefer things like YouTube. I mean, you can broadcast anything nowadays. Look at this teaching. If you think about it, I'm broadcasting it to you in the same way that you would watch a YouTube video. How meta is that? But ultimately, I think one of the things we will see once COVID has settled down is we move back towards a more effective method of delivering education. That's blended healthcare, blended education, in the sense of people will have both elements of virtual as well as face-to-face kind of interactions and things. But already we're seeing virtual conferences and that kind of stuff happen. I've run a few myself, and actually these are an amazing way of delivering health information, delivering any kind of information, to be honest, in a way that means that you can learn effectively and at a time and a way that suits you, the learner. So these are the three kind of colleagues that I see currently in general practice, and I think this is where we're also going to move towards. But actually, are you the fourth type? Are you the one that's going to be a combination of these three? Or something even better, something different? And I think that's the real benefit of general practice. General practice, its future, is the fact it is still and always has been one of the most adaptable and open careers available in medicine. And that's one thing that you will not find anywhere else. You can do so much more of this kind of stuff in a way that you would want to or not want to. And what I would say is pick the parts that work best for you. That's absolutely the power of a general practice. And learn to have that element of continuity of patients as well. I've only been given 10 minutes. I think I've gone slightly over that, but I hope you found this useful and effective. If you do want any of the further details, feel free to contact me. You can do so, Twitter at Dr.Gandalf52. You can email me, as you can see there. Definitely find out more of my content as you wish. And just to give you a little bit of a taster, if you either hold your phone up to the QR code and get the link, or you can type it in there, bit.ly/Kumek feedback. Fill in a quick little feedback form. You'll get a copy of all the slides and all the links that come with the slides in terms of all the video content and all the other kind of things that's available there for you. And I hope you find that useful and effective in terms of looking at the future of your general practice careers. Thank you very much.